Hello, Andy speaking.
Hello, Andy. It's Tim here. I'm calling for an interview.
Yes, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Welcome to Wellington. I'm sorry it's so cold today.
Oh, I love it. I don't mind cold weather at all. Great riding weather.
Great writing weather. You've been to
And
Wellington.
just like Melbourne.
Yeah. Oh, well, yes, yeah. 4 seasons in one day. How can we argue with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
You've been to Wellington before?
I have a few times now, yeah. Enough to know where Slow Boat Records is without needing to look at a map. So,
Are you a bit of a record vinyl junkie, are you?
well, not so much vinyl, just CD and alternative music junkie. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a great city for that and great shop.
Yeah, I read once that you were in a band in the 80s called Gothic Farmhouse.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Part of the underground experimental music scene in Melbourne. Yeah.
So, how does that lead to being a children's author? It's quite different, and a TV presenter and things like that. How did you make that jump?
Well, I was the lead singer of this band because I couldn't play an instrument, and I couldn't really sing, but I was always writing song lyrics, and they were usually parodies and silly in some way. That's how I ended up as the singer. But I realised after a few years, not a bad amount of success in terms of the underground scene there, I just thought, I haven't got the musical thing, but what I really love is the words. And so I started doing writing courses and began writing stories and took a job as an English teacher, as a high school English teacher, and met all these kids who hated reading. So I started crafting the stories towards them. And they were kind of, rock and roll, kind of punk, out of control stories. And they loved them. And then I thought, oh, this is great. I could be like I self-publish my own books, just like we used to self-publish our own cassettes back in the day. So that's how it kind of led. And then I found myself out in front of large groups of kids, making them laugh and getting them excited, and it's not so different to being a singer in a band.
Yeah, and then you were presenting a TV show as well, weren't you?
Not really. I don't think I've been on many kids shows, but I've never presented one.
What's the connection with the Just series?
Sorry. Well, it became a television program. A French-Canadian company turned it into a cartoon called What's with Andy. So I've always been the star of my own stories. There's always an Andy hanging around there because I find that it's the easiest way for me to tell a believably unbelievable story is to say, this is happening to me, and then this is what I did next. And so that's been something I've always loved to do. A bit like Seinfeld is a character in his own sitcom. I adopted that very early, and it was a risky strategy too, because I thought, well, the serious literary scene is not going to take me terribly serious here. This is not going to be regarded as great literature, but that was not my concern. My concern was to engage kids who had wandered away from reading or who had never been readers, to convince them that the written word is a great medium for fun and information, and I wanted them to read. So I did whatever I could.
So when did you hit upon the idea of the 13th floor series, the 39, the 52, etc.? That's what I really love about that is that combination of illustration and writing that are kind of mingled together almost by stealth, the way that comic books, when they really work well, just kind of draw you in. You don't realize you're reading, and you don't realize you're reading with your eyes, or you're visually, or it's a real mix of the two, but it also has that sense of buy-in that kids kind of feel like the illustrations belong to them.
Yeah, that's a beautiful description of what I try to do, because as well as books, growing up, I loved comics, and I've never made a distinction between the two. It's all print and illustration. And some of my favourite children's books, like Alice in Wonderland, Pinocchio, Winnie the Pooh are just as equally famous for their drawings, which help a young reader to into the world, because when you begin reading, every word that you read costs you effort, and a whole sentence and a whole paragraph can be a lot of work. We forget as accomplished readers how difficult that is. So I think a picture, to use that tired old cliche, can tell 1,000 words. And that's why when I say, hi, my name's Andy, each book starts, hi, I'm Andy, and then there's a picture of me. This is my friend Terry, picture of Terry. And this is our 104-story treehouse. And then Terry just draws the entire thing so that you are just sucked in there, and you're in that treehouse, and you know who the main characters are within 4 or 5 pages.
When did the collaboration with Terry come about, and where did this idea for the treehouse come about?
Well, that started back in 1993. As a result of my English teaching, I'd written a book for other teachers about how to teach creative writing in a lively, compelling way in the classroom. And the publisher, the educational publisher, put Terry onto the case and said, we think Terry will be a great illustrator for you because you've both got an offbeat sense of humour. And they were absolutely right. And we've been working together ever since then, so about 25 years. And we've had the incredible luxury of having an attentive audience both in Australia and in New Zealand for all of that time. So we were able to experiment with different ways of doing each book. At first there was a lot of text and just minimal pictures around the edges. And then I began to realise what Terry could do. And I said, I think we need to get me out of the spotlight and bring you more in. So we did a few books together called The Bad Book and The Very Bad Book. Then we did What Body Part Is That? Mock non-fiction books. And we were just experimenting all the time with how can we do this? What if we did that? And The Treehouse became one of those books. It was an experimental book where we said, let's write a book about how we can't write a book because we're in this amazing fantasy treehouse, and Terry, as in real life, is always distracted and doing something else, and I'm trying to keep the show on the road. And I said, we'll be the characters, we'll live in this fantasy treehouse, and that will become the book. So it's based very closely on our lives, although the details are, of course, completely made up.
And what I found even from the beginning, and my girls read the books, one of them in particular just loved the way that you double down every time with the ridiculous Heath Robinson, sort of things. There's bowling alleys, there's see-through swimming pools, there's tanks of sharks right in the middle of us, and things like that, veggie vaporizers because you don't want to eat your vegetables, marshmallow machines, and that's only just the start of things. It just seems that every time, where did those ideas come from? I mean, there must be a burnout point. Do the kids provide them now to you? Do you have that kind of relationship?
The kids, in every book, there's 13 new levels. I would say on average the kids might provide one that's usable in the treehouse world. The rest come from just making lists. I make lists, endless lists of bizarre and desirable and nightmarish levels, and just I keep whittling them down till I get the 13 really great ones. And then, I might go to Terry, and my wife Jill is part of the creative team as well, as both editor and co-writer. And if I can get them excited about a level, I know I'm onto something. And I love challenging Terry to come up with new things. I don't know how he's going to draw half the levels that we do. I just know that he will rise to the challenge. And so part of the fun for me is thinking up impossible things for him to draw. In the latest book, for instance, there's a never-ending staircase. And I said, Terry, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but here it is. And so he drew an Escher-like staircase that's turning and twisting in on itself. And at one point, the characters have to climb the staircase. And I said, right, here's 30 pages. They've just got to keep climbing your staircase for 30 pages. See if you can hold the attention. But that's Terry. I know he can because he just gets lost in his own drawings, and it's delightful.
What's the most bizarre thing you think you've come up with that's really surprised you that sort of ended up in the books?
I could give you a few, but I think when you asked me that, the first level that came to my mind was the exploding eyeball level, which coincidentally, it wasn't a kid's idea, but somehow it came up when we were entertaining a group of kids. Sometimes we have sessions where they're just yelling ideas and Terry's live drawing. And something came up about exploding eyeballs, and the kids all laughed and said, "How cool!" And I said, "What's cool about going into a level where your eyeballs explode?" And they said, "We don't know, it's just funny." So I said, "Okay, let's put an exploding eyeball level in there." And Terry drew a box in the background that says "spare eyeballs." So
for when you've blown them out.
Yes, so you go in over and over again. But yeah, I delight in taking something that's nonsensical and impossible, and with Terry's, wonderful kind of realistic drawings, making it live on the page and in the reader's imagination. But see, the treehouse, if you ever tried to actually build it, it would never work, because it's a dream-like structure.
Yeah.
It's done in conjunction with the reader, so every reader probably remakes the treehouse the way they imagine it.
Well, it's sort of, I think my daughter was talking about it in terms of, she'd read The Magic Faraway Tree, and she was sort of thinking along the same lines as that, and I guess that's a structure that, the kids, some kids have seen, but then she reads the classics, and there'll be a whole pile of kids that don't. One of the things that struck me, though, that was really, really cool about what you've created here is that it doesn't belong to a particular boy genre, girl genre. It doesn't belong to any of that, which is really difficult in its own sense. Even Harry Potter, things like that, which are great classics, you tend to side on one side of, you're either the boy or the girl reading it, and you have a different view of things. This one doesn't belong to any of that.
No, and we're really proud and conscious of that. And the key, I think, is probably Enid Blyton. As you mentioned, The Faraway Tree was a great favourite of mine. I loved the sense of danger and wonder and kind of endless possibilities of that tree, particularly the lands at the top of the tree. You'd stick your head in and it might be upside down land, and another time it'd be the land where they yell and shout rude things at you. It was unpredictable and it was kind of scary. But it wasn't that, I don't think that was boy or girl either. There was a boy and two girls as the family that explored the tree. So yeah, I'm because we of course we've got my wife on board. We're always checking that the girls in the books are not just watching the boys do things, that the girls are strong and independent. And the Jill character herself is very much a Pippi Longstocking sort of character. Lives by herself in a house full of animals, and goes all over the galaxy rescuing animals, and is brave and strong and probably much smarter than Andy and Terry. Well, definitely much smarter. But she's got her own life, and I'm delighted at the events where she sometimes is. The kids will request that they meet her and have their picture taken with her. She's got her own fan club.
Isn't that wonderful? And there's another little element you've added into the last book as well, which is that there are little jokes in the corner, which I have to say are very much dad jokes, if that makes sense.
Well, they're kind of the riddles that we grew up with. Well, I grew up in the 70s, and you used to get books of riddles. So one of our prime reading things. So kind of rated a lot of those. But in each book, there's some sort of thing for the reader to do. In the 78 Story Treehouse, there was a spy cow hidden on every single page.
That's right, yeah.
And so they could use the book. They play with the book. It's kind of a puzzle book, and spot the cow book. In 65 Story Treehouse, we had a news feed going along the bottom of every page. The action on every page was summed up in a 42 character news feed, because we had a Tree NN newsroom in that particular book. And the theme of of 104 is they're trying to write jokes with a joke writing pen, but Andy's got toothache. So then I thought, yeah, let's have a joke on every page, and that's that word play.
Yeah, there's interweaving things that make the book multi-readable in that sense, which is quite smart. Is that something that you really enjoyed when you were reading books?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you also enjoy those ones where you change the endings at the end and read backwards and forwards, that kind of thing as well?
I do. They were a little bit past my time. I didn't grow up with them, but I appreciated the game of them. And I do a number of choose-your-own adventures in the Just books, just disgusting and just shocking, but they're bogus ones where every choice that you make leads to a gruesome and unnecessary death until you get to the final one, where you die as well. My instinct is always to undercut things with humour. But I loved books. In Melbourne, they're a particularly Melbourne thing. There were these things called Cole's Funny Picture Books, and they were just by a bookseller in the late 1900s who filled books with millions of tiny pictures and jokes and rhymes and everything. You could never, ever get to the end of those books. There would always be a new thing. And Terry's drawings are very much like that. You'll keep finding new elements and little animals commenting and saying things, or sometimes completely irrelevant from anything that's going on in the book, but it's so delightful.
Well, thank you. It's a joy to be a parent watching a child read. I know my family are ferocious readers, but even so, they're still discovering new stuff all the time, and that's great. I've actually watched a lot of boys in particular that I know who don't necessarily read particularly well, but they'll always grab one of these to at least occupy their time. They're a little bit like a video game without the electronics attached at times.
Yeah, and they come with the benefit that as you read, you're improving your ability to decode text, which, when you walk away from the books, you can then read at a higher level. And that's a useful life skill, whether you go on to be a passionate, committed reader or not. Greater literacy leads to better outcomes for people's lives.
Absolutely. What's next for you? Another treehouse, or? Yeah,
we're locked in now. The kids won't let us do anything else, and we don't want to do anything else. But within the treehouse, it's an infinite structure. So if we want to do a joke book, we can just incorporate that within the treehouse world. So 117 story treehouse will be released next July.
I'm a bit worried that the treehouse is going to capsize at some point with too much information.
A lot of people are, and so that's going to be the subject of a future treehouse book. I think we're going to have to go. I want to go underground and explore the root system and see if this tree is okay. So yes, your concern will be addressed eventually.
Watch this space. Well, enjoy Wellington while you're here, and I hope you get to the record store along the way. You'll be after the New Zealand music, of course.
Of course, the Chills. The king of all. Well, not all of them. There's so many great bands here, but particular soft spot for the Chills, and then Split Ends, of course.
Yes.
Well, we claim as an Australian band, but they're really in New Zealand. We all know that.
Yes, let's not argue about that one. Thank you so much for your time. That was wonderful to talk to you, and we're definitely looking forward to the next book along and the next one after that, and maybe we go underground as well.
Oh, we'll be underground. Don't worry. To the centre of the earth. We're there already.
Wonderful. You have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your interest.
Okay.
See you later. Bye.